Today, I'm thrilled to introduce Jake Thomas, who is the co-founder of PACT Outdoors. PACT Outdoors is a Colorado-based company that designs products that make it easier and more sustainable for people to do their business in the outdoors. And without further ado, I'll hand it off to you, Jake.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chelsea, and thanks everybody for your time. As she mentioned, this is a sort of a short, quick hit of information. And so what I'm going to do is move really quickly through some of these upfront slides that normally I might spend a little more time on and really focus on sharing the data from a research study that we did last summer at 14er in Colorado, alongside a couple research partners, including Penn State and Leave No Trace. So I really want to give as much time as possible to just share that data with all of you. So I'm going to just rip through some of these initial slides and we'll go from there. And I'll try to leave as much time as I can at the end for questions without sort of like, totally overly paring down what I'm about to share with you. But thanks so much and pumped to be here. So as Chelsea set up, we are PACT Outdoors is a rural Colorado-based company. We're out of Gunnison and Crested Butte, Colorado, and we make backcountry bathroom solutions. And I'll really quickly share what those look like, and kind of how we got to this point. I don't need to stay on this for any amount of time because I'm sure everybody on this call knows and is intimately familiar with the figures and facts and realities around increasing and growing participation in outdoor recreation. The simple reality that goes along with that is more people means more poop in the outdoors. And one of the things that this study demonstrated, and I'll get to here shortly, is just how much of that pooping behavior can be taking place beyond the reach of trailhead bathroom facilities. Poop creates a number of challenges that have this like very far reaching and wide ranging impact. So it can be environmental challenges like water quality. It can threaten the health of wildlife. It's certainly a public health issue. It is a huge resource burden for land managers to take care of and maintain existing established bathroom facilities and solutions, but also managing mishandled human waste when it needs to be packed out and isn't, or isn't buried properly. A lot of this, from our experience here in Colorado, the place we're most intimately familiar with, is driving this increase in regulations. So in the Gunnison Valley, where we're based, for example, we have taken essentially all of the dispersed camping in our valley and converted it into fee-based camping. And these decisions aren't made lightly. They're given tremendous consideration and input from a number of stakeholders in the community and in the public land space. But our stance is mishandled human waste should never be a reason that we have to restrict or reduce access. We need to be finding both tools and solutions for people that help them to be more prepared. And that's really kind of the belief that our business is built upon. So way back, if we rewind about 5 years, when PACT was just getting going, we were working with Moose Jaw Mountaineering. They're a no longer existing outdoor retailer, but they gave us access to their email database of hundreds of thousands of users. And we put out a survey around backcountry bathroom behavior and got 25,000 respondents. And three things kind of came out of that survey. First was 72% of folks across ages, experience levels, and outdoor activities said they'd had a time in the outdoors when they had to poop, but were unprepared to do so properly. This is a reality that most outdoor enthusiasts are faced with at some point on their learning curve. Secondly, when we asked people what the greatest challenges they felt were to going to the bathroom in the outdoors, two things came up by and large over everything else. It was one, having the right tools with them and feeling clean. And then we started to kind of dive into like, what would be important factors in those tools? What would they ideally help you to do? And people said, again, feeling clean, that they would be lightweight, grab and go, and environmentally friendly. It's a lot of the same factors that people look for in other pieces of outdoor gear. The difference here, given that this is a taboo topic, is that up until recently, if you were burying your waste, your standard kit was a home hack. It was a Ziploc bag, a half-used roll of TP, a trowel, some combination of elements like that. And if that's your established practice and you grew up using that, great, that's awesome. Keep doing it. But for a lot of people, because we didn't have dedicated kits and tools like we do for everything else that we do in the outdoors, it was less likely to be top of mind as something that you need to pack, whether you're going out for an extended outing or a short day hike. And that was where we really came in with our suite of products. So we make a range of solutions for both bearing your waste and packing out your poop. And what we've done with those solutions is we've tried to address challenges that users have for different types of activities. A great example is trail runners. They're ultra weight and space constrained. And so what we found is that trail runners are less likely to dig a cat hole. They're more likely to use their shoe or grab a rock or a stick, and this makes that burial practice a little less effective and compliant. So we designed the PACT Ultralight Kit, which is designed to fit in a waist belt or a vest pack. So we're doing all these little things with our products to try and make them really, really effective for different types of users and activities, and of course, different environments that necessitate different strategies. What we realized, and I'm just about to get into our research data, and the meat of this is that it's great for us if we sell a kit to somebody at REI. It helps keep the lights on for our business, obviously. But that person who's shopping for this product at REI, for example, probably isn't the person who needs the most help. And so a few years ago, that set us down this pathway of not just focusing on product solutions, but actually systemic ones that are going to help meet people with the right solution at that right moment in time when they're heading into the outdoors. And that's what a lot of our research revolves around. So there's three components when we try to implement a pilot program or a research study that we're kind of looking at. One are the tools. Do those tools make compliance easier and more convenient? How are we communicating best practices and the use of those tools? And is that communication really simple, consistent, and compelling? And then lastly is sort of the delivery method or the infrastructure. Are we presenting the two things, tools and communication, at the right place and the right time to deliver the greatest potential impact? So that's really the basis for a study we ran with Penn State, Leave No Trace, and the Colorado 14ers Initiative here in Colorado last summer. We affectionately called it the Clean 14 Project, and it was a pilot program and study to explore packing out behavior, so wag bag use, on Colorado's 14ers. If you talk to people at CFI, they'll tell you that there isn't a single 14er. We have 58 in Colorado where human waste isn't an issue. And there's two main reasons for that. The first is these are alpine environments. You don't have a good soil base, especially when you're above tree line. And so it makes burying a really challenging method, or really, frankly, an ineffective one. The second, Colorado 14ers receive an ultra high amount of traffic in a really condensed period of time. So during a 10-week peak in the summer, a lot of our 14ers will see upwards of 10, 15, 20,000 users during that time frame. So what did we do? We built what we believe is the first distribution and disposal kiosk just past the trailhead of Colorado's tallest 14,000 foot peak, Mount Elbert. And that's the shot right there. We borrowed a bear-proof trash can from the town of Crested Butte. We put on this little sort of kiosk dispersal portion where the wag bags could be held, and you can obviously open up that handle and dispose of them. We intentionally did not make this enticing. We didn't put beautiful creative on there that explains how to use wag bags or why they're so important, things that would certainly help compliance, but would skew our data. This was meant to say, these are human waste pack out bags. You can take one and use it and dispose of it here. So what did we want to learn? Attitudes and beliefs around packing out poop, people's challenges and barriers to complying with this practice, factors that persuade them to pack out, and ultimately, does physical infrastructure support better compliance? Again, this was done at Mount Elbert and San Isabel National Forest. Researchers from Penn State collected data for 19 days spanning the end of July and August. This was a qualitative survey that we issued, and we used a number of different statistical methods to analyze the data. Our part in this, as I kind of showed on a previous slide, PACT makes a pack out kit. We were launching that last year. That's sort of our business interest in this, to be fully transparent. We are trying to make pack out behavior more commonplace and more acceptable and a greater norm in the outdoors. And we do that through a whole range of reasons. We make these things bright and vibrant. We put bold, easy to follow instructions on them. We explain to people why packing out is such a great practice and skill set to have in the outdoors, which aligns with Leave No Trace practice. And then we address some user challenges. We made the outer bag thicker and more durable and odor resistant. We put our packed wipes inside, which address issues that people have with cleanliness. And we're grateful to be working with a number of land manager partners in the U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management, of which we supply lower cost wag bags or pack out kits too. Okay, so getting into the data, moving right along here. We had 410 respondents in the survey and got almost an 80% response rate. One thing we worry about with this type of research is if a lot of people are saying no to a survey about pooping, we might not get a relevant sample that we can extrapolate to be representative of all 14er hikers. In this case, people were very enthusiastic about saying yes and taking our survey about their backcountry bathroom practices. So that was great. Mount Elbert hikers, what does it look like? So Mount Elbert sees, according to CFI, about 15,000 hikers per year. Through our surveys, we found that 60% were non-residents, which is really interesting and speaks to just how much of a tourist, out-of-state tourist draw hiking peaks like this actually is. 69% had visited other 14ers, and the median number of 14ers that they had hiked was 5. And this was really our goal, was picking a peak that was not likely to be your first 14er. So not necessarily getting the most novice hiker that you might find at some of our others in the state, but also not one that is so technical or so remote that you're getting an ultra experienced user who's setting out to hike all of them. So hitting that median number of 5 was a good indication that we were getting a little bit more of an average 14er hiker in our survey. Pardon my language, where shit happens. This was one of the most interesting things that we found in the study. So extrapolating the number of people that pooped via our surveys to the total number of Elbert hikers, we found that 1,650 people pooped at or on Mount Elbert in 2024. That's 11% of total hikers. Of those, 30% of them pooped at the trailhead using the vault, while the other 70% pooped somewhere on the mountain. This was pretty surprising to everybody involved, at least at the outset when we first looked at it. Given the resources that we know go into maintaining vault toilets, we would expect them to be addressing the needs of a larger percentage of the users. However, when we think about the nature of a 14er and that experience, you're getting up early in the morning, your eating schedule is very different. There's a lot of altitude that's factoring into play. These are all things that do funny things with our bowels and probably make it more likely that people are going to have to go to the bathroom. So while this is, indicative, so I think what we're careful to do with this is recognize that this is a specific type of environment, a high elevation peak. And doing studies and research like this to understand where bathroom practice is taking place in other contexts that are maybe less extreme and unique is something we're interested in doing with further research. But we were certainly surprised to find that 70% of folks were going on the mountain. Okay, so attitudes around wag bags and packing out. 3 out of 4 folks have heard of wag bags before, but only a little over a third of individuals have used them in the past. Similarly, 87% of folks said they would consider using a wag bag regardless of whether it was required practice or not. So what these attitudinal indicators are suggesting to us is that you have a lot of awareness about this practice, at least with 14er hikers, but use and trial is relatively low overall. Building on this, 34% of folks said they would only use a wag bag if it was required practice, while 44% said the requirements don't actually matter. That if the ecosystem dictates it, they're happy to use it as a practice. This was really encouraging to us, that such a high percentage of people would say, no, requirements don't actually matter. It's whether the ecosystem requires it or necessitates that practice. Only 8% of people in the survey said they would never use a wag bag. And in fact, 80% of people in that same question said they strongly or very strongly agreed with that statement. So it indicates that a lot of folks are really open to this practice, but haven't necessarily tried it, and that regulations and requirements aren't necessarily necessary to get people to do it. Another question on the attitudinal side that we looked at was asking people to rank their preference of different practices. So which would you prefer to use 1 through 4? A vault toilet, bearing your waist and your teepee, bearing your waist and packing out your teepee, and packing everything out via a wag bag. What we found that while preference to use a vault toilet was the highest, 60% of people ranked it as their number 1 preferred practice. Burying everything, burying and packing out teepee, and wag bags were ranked almost equally in terms of practice. And this showed up with additional questions among users of wag bags, is that after using it, it becomes sort of comparable to burying as preferred practices for individuals. So I think a lot of us who are really close to this can have attitudes and ideas that packing out poop is something that people are really, really strongly opposed to. And I think everything that we saw throughout this survey and this study showed that that's not necessarily the case, at least with this type of outdoor enthusiast. Okay, let's talk about actual wag bag use. This was why we really wanted to install an actual kiosk so that we could see what real practice looked like in the field, not just people's sort of self-reported beliefs and intentions. So when we put this kiosk in, we found 29% of hikers during the survey period, the 19 days that we were conducting these surveys, took a wag bag. 30% of all people who pooped at or on Mount Elbert packed out their waste using a wag bag. So if you recall from earlier slides, 30% of folks during our survey used the vault toilet, 30% of folks packed out their poop using a wag bag, and then the remaining 40% was a mix between the two burial practices that I've described and a small segment of people who just answered other and clearly did something else. So instantly overnight, for putting this kiosk practice in place, packing out poop was like a solution set that was right there in the mix with all the other practices in terms of how frequently it was used. And so that was really, really encouraging to us. Another interesting point about this 30% is that of all of the people who packed out their waste, only one of them came to the trailhead with their own wag bag. Every single person used and needed to use the one that was provided to them at the kiosk. This last piece here is something we focused on and seen consistency with previous studies that we've done. And that's this idea that providing somebody with a tool, in this case a wag bag, makes them more likely to bring and use that same tool in the future. So tools affect future behavior, not just one instance. So 80% or almost 80% of folks said that trying a wag bag makes them more likely to bring one on future outings. And so kind of building on this a little bit, we looked at some correlations between wag bag use and perceptions of wag bags using a Pearson correlation coefficient. So we found a statistically significant correlation between past wag bag use and perceived ease of use. So the more you use it, the more you think it's easy to use. Similarly, we found the same thing with past use of wag bags and an affinity for this practice. And so that was really encouraging that if we can get more people using this practice, they will adopt it more permanently and feel ultimately good about it, just as they do anything else in the outdoors. So there's a whole bunch of takeaways here. I've gone through this really pretty quickly, so this should all be top of mind. A lot of 14er hikers are pooping, on trails versus at the trailhead vault toilet. Vault toilets and permanent bathroom facilities are huge budget line items, and they're unfortunately not addressing a lot of the needs of 14er hikers in a highly sensitive ecosystem. People are really open to packing out their poop, and they kind of have a solid grasp on how it benefits the environment. I didn't get into this question set, but we explored people's understandings of water quality and public health and pristine enjoyment of nature and some of these things and how waste connects to them. And we were really surprised at how high those levels of knowledge were. People will happily take a free wag bag, use it, and drop it off when it's free of charge at the trailhead. Using tools like a wag bag alters people's at least self-reported future behavior and likelihood to bring them on future outing. And what we liked about a kiosk strategy was that it enabled us to reach a high number of users with less staff and lower costs while also getting data on take rate. So to kind of wrap this up before I open it up to questions, hopefully with like a few minutes left over here, is what PACT is really interested in is strategies that both create more prepared users. So we build systems that help make it easier for users to adopt new practices and use them, and in doing so, save money and resources for land managers. And so that's really how we look at the research that gets us most excited. That's knowing the cost that goes along with waste management in the outdoors. And we think complementing regulatory strategies, which are obviously essential, with ones that kind of empower users to a degree is a really interesting space for us as it pertains to waste management, but other practices that we're trying to instill in users in the outdoors. And so, what we're looking to focus on and looking for partners for is additional contexts outside of just 14ers. So, other environments like a national park, for example, is one that has likely a very different user than a 14er. And then, how do we optimize things like, for example, with the kiosk and messaging strategies to drive more of the desired behavior that we're looking for? So that's a little bit of look into the future and what we're doing. Thank you so much for your time. If you have questions or would like to go back and forth about any of this further, again, I'm Jake, and my email is jake@packedoutdoors.com. And again, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jake. There were a couple questions. The first one was from Heather, and it says, does your research also include temperature and heat index?
Yeah, so it does not. I kind of think that's a good question. I kind of think GIS data may be able to help with this, but it was not a part of the survey component. But I wonder if we could go back and look at some historical data from the dates that we were sampling and surveying consumers at the trailhead. So if there's a specific sort of goal or idea in that, I do think that's something we could look at.
And I think the goal and idea is further in the chat. So I'll let you read that one. There's just a couple of responses. But
Great.
next question comes from Jen. It says, gross question. We have issues with people bagging dog waste and leaving the full bags along the trail. Has there been any indication of some people doing the same with wag bags?
Yeah, this is a great question. Honestly, this was our biggest concern in the study was that we were going to have wag bags littering the trail. And so we had a team, Colorado 14ers Initiative was actually doing trail work at Mount Elbert, which was another reason we chose this location. And so they did daily sweeps to see what was left behind. And I can say that the number of wag bags that were improperly disposed of, i.e. left on the trail, was less than 5. Not all the wag bags that were used were disposed of in the kiosk. Many were, but I think because it's brown and it kind of blended in, a lot of people on their way out walked right past it and ended up driving them out in the past. So I have a lot of other anecdotal pieces from other U.S. Forest Service districts on this. White River National Forest, which is near us, has been using a kiosk strategy for a number of years. They have not had issues with this. They don't require wag bag use, but they're also really surprised at how this hasn't become an issue. Now, we had disposal. That was part of our reason was build disposal into the kiosk. But I do think it's something to kind of continue to look at. I've heard from at Mount Whitney, for example, that this is actually an issue. So really, really important question, but I think one that we ultimately need to dive a little bit deeper into.
Perfect. And then the last one, if we can hit it really quick, is given that poo is a hazmat issue, how are staff being trained to clear out the wag bag dispensers at the trailheads?
Yeah, PACT, myself, and our Penn State researchers are the ones doing this. So ultimately, we used a double bag trash bag system to get it out at the kiosks. And then we had a pre-established relationship with our waste management facility, i.e. our landfill, where we were disposing of these. So when we showed up, it wasn't sort of just treated as other trash. It was treated as hazardous materials, and they were prepared for that in advance. So this again varies a little bit from what we found by location in which this is taking place. But our strategy was to have a conversation with the disposal site in advance, and then also make sure we were double bagging the wag bags in heavy duty trash bags to haul them out.
Jake, we truly appreciate you being here today. We'll be seeing you in the woods.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate your time. And Penn State's going to be working to publish this study over the coming 12 months. And so if you're interested in reviewing a manuscript when it's complete, feel free to reach out to myself and we'll make sure you can see the complete write-up on it.